the recording after. So thank you so much to those of you who have joined Sierra and I for today's session, Support and Tips for Preparing a Conference Talk. We decided to put on the CFP Speakers Series again, leading up to our next Connect conference, just to give those who are applying to speak more support. And I'm really looking forward to today's session. So my name is Mackenzie Bryant. I'm the Digital Solutions Manager at WWCode. I'm really excited to have Sierra OBryan with me today, who is the Senior 2 Mobile Engineer at Atomic Robot, as well as one of our new leadership fellows. So Sierra, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here as well with Mackenzie and talk about talking. As Mackenzie said, I'm Sierra and I am a mobile engineer in Cincinnati, Ohio in the United States. And I primarily focus in Android. And then I also volunteer for Women Who Code. And I've also given talks all over the world and started out as a very, very nervous speaker.
So we always start our Women Who Code events with our mission and our vision. And our mission is inspiring women to excel in technology careers. And we envision a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and leaders in technology. Women Who Code is an inclusive community dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community, regardless of gender, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, ability, physical appearance, body size, race, ethnicity, age, religion, socioeconomic status, case, creed, political affiliation, or preferred programming languages. Our events are intended to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and anyone who is here for this purpose is welcome. We do not tolerate harassment of members in any form. Our code of conduct applies to all Women Who Code events and online communities. You can read the full version and access our incident report form at womenwhocode.com/code of conduct. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you and welcome our new leadership fellows for the 2021 cohort. We have Anjali, who is leading the blockchain track, Jachi, who's leading the cloud track, Princia, leading front end, Sierra, who we have here today, leading mobile, Stephanie, leading the Python track, and Zareen, leading data science. And also meet Gracia Cristaldi, who's also here today during this meeting, and she's the program manager of the digital community, so she'll be leading all of our 2021 leadership fellows. So hello, Gracia. Some important dates to remember: our Connect Forward conference is November 18th and 19th, 2021. The deadline to speak, to apply to speak, is October 15th. And then we also have another speaker series session coming up in September on the 24th, and that will be a more workshop format, and it'll be putting together a conference talk, a how-to guide with Louie and Claudia, who are two very active members of our mobile track. So these are just some frequently asked questions that we get when people are applying to speak at our conferences. Is there a required competency to be a speaker? And do I need to be a CTO, have a specific career title, or certain degree? And no, you do not need any of those things to apply to speak at our conferences. If you have knowledge about a particular technical subject matter or career-related topic, please share that knowledge with us. And we support and encourage first-time speakers to apply. Another question we often get is, what should I present on? You can present on core technologies, a solution, a work project and its challenges, a project you created for fun, and you can always find inspiration from Women Who Code YouTube channel, where we post weekly uploads of previous talks, as well as talks from our past conferences. So what technical categories are we accepting talks on? So we have these technical categories that we primarily accept talks on, but this time for Connect Forward in November, we're also accepting career-focused categories. So applying for a job, technical interviews, like algorithms and interview prep, salary negotiation, the non-traditional pathways into tech, returning after a career break, managing a team, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and other career-related topics. So can I submit a talk with another speaker? We absolutely accept joint talks. Sarah's given a joint talk in the past, and then we just ask that each speaker still apply, and in your applications, you can use the same talk title, description, and just leave us a note, letting us know that you have a co-speaker. Another question we often get, because we are a global organization, is that a speaker is located in a different time zone. Will they still be able to participate? And although we don't have our official programming and schedule determined yet, we accept speakers located from all over the world in various time zones. And when we create our programming for the event, we try to represent as many diverse speakers as possible. And at our previous Connect conference a few months ago, we reached an audience in 91 countries. So I definitely encourage you to apply to speak if you are located in a different time zone. And does WWCode have any resources for writing a CFP? So we actually have an entire page dedicated to some of the resources that will be shared in today's presentation and have also been shared by previous speakers as well. And that you can find at www.code.com/CFP-resources. And here again, here's those links, more resources, www.code.com/CFP resources, and www.code.com/connect-CFP for applying to speak. And this is just a reminder that our CFP submissions are anonymous. And the reason why we choose to make them anonymous to our reviewers is in an effort to reduce unconscious bias in selecting standout talks and workshops, and to ensure that we have diverse representation across our speaker selection. We keep the names, companies, and other speaker information removed from the selection process. That way, the team can focus on the quality of the talk rather than the person. So how can I make my submission stand out? So remembering that reviewers only see the title and the description of your talk submission, it's best to be as descriptive as possible. So choose an engaging title that captures the essence of your topic, and write a thorough description of your talk. So some questions you can ask yourself when you're putting together your title and your description are, what will the audience learn or benefit from attending your talk? Are there any learning outcomes? What makes this topic interesting to you, and what also makes it interesting to the intended audience? Is there any additional information you want to share about your talk that you think reviewers should know? You should definitely include that in your talk description. So let's take a look at some title examples. So these look pretty great, right? Design for AI, an introduction to Mule, analyzing water quality, and problem solving like a pro. Now, those titles are okay, but they are vague. So by adding more detail, the purpose of the talk becomes more clear. So it changed from design for AI. Why do you need creativity to design artificial intelligence products? An introduction to Mule becomes how it makes API development easy. Analyzing water quality with GeoJSON and Node-RED. Problem solving like a pro. Applying the scientific method to P1 investigations. So as you can see, just by adding more detail, your topic becomes clear to the reader. And so we have a better idea of what the outcome of the talk will be. All right, and I will hand it over to Sierra, who is going to talk about being ready to submit a talk and what happens next.
Yay, thank you so much, Mackenzie. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we'll try to make this as interactive as possible. These are my personal tips for how to submit a talk and what to do and what to think. And so they might not work for everyone. So definitely keep that in mind as well. So the first thing that I want to talk about is how to pick a topic. For me, this is one of the hardest parts of writing a talk is what I should actually be talking about. I was meeting with a colleague a couple of days ago, and she said, I would go to a whole talk on just picking a topic for a different talk. And so while I cannot put together an entire talk on this, I can give you one slide's worth of tips. So the first thing, and you hear this all the time, is that your perspective is really valuable. And so it's okay if you're picking a topic that there are already a ton of YouTube tutorials about, or already articles, or already content, because you might have learned it in a different way. You might present the material in a different way. You might say something in a different way. You might have a slide that just makes sense to someone. And so those topics are always valuable, even if it does already exist somewhere on the internet. It's also important to remember that entry-level talks are okay. I am personally an Android developer, and I know a lot about Android development, or at least I think I do. And so it's really easy to forget that because I'm surrounded by mobile developers all the time, that there are people who don't know all the things that I know, and that it's okay to start with an entry level talk about this is how you get started with Android. This is some of the things you need to know. This is like the basic architecture, and these kind of topics are okay and valuable to people in our community. I personally don't know anything about web development. And so all of those talks are brand new information for me when you have an introductory talk. It's also important to think about what you do every day. I know that it's really easy to get bogged down in your day-to-day work and think that it's not interesting, it's not exciting, it's not cool, just because you personally do it day in and day out. But those kinds of things could be really interesting to other people because they don't have those same opportunities. For me, I think that I get to use some really cool libraries and get to work with those things and dig deep into some of the different Android frameworks. And that is not, and some of those libraries aren't things that everyone else uses every day. And so those are really good places to start when thinking about pulling a new topic. And if you're really struggling with figuring out what topic to pick, my best recommendation is to talk to someone else about your day-to-day work. If you go somewhere outside your specialty, outside your team, a friend who works in tech, or even a parent, and say, hey, let me talk to you and tell you about what I do every day. And you tell me what you think is really interesting and what you would like to learn more about. And so those are a really good way to start finding some topics and narrowing it down on what other people around you think is really cool about the things that you're doing. And so as you start on this journey to give talks, I already mentioned that I am a really nervous public speaker. It makes me really uncomfortable. It really took a lot of work to kind of jump into that the first time. And so these are some of my tips for how to overcome some of those nerves, especially when even submitting your topic. So first, find someone to support you throughout the process and be your cheerleader. There are a lot of people in your life that are technical and not technical who can help you do this. So it might be your boss or a coworker or an external mentor, or the friend that you just talked to about what kind of topics you might want to get started with. And so they can help read your CFP, they can help go over your slides, they can help cheer you on from start to finish. And I also want to call out, here in the Women Who Code community, there are tons of people who are happy to play this role for you. We have access to a huge group of seasoned speakers and first-time speakers alike, and people who have never given talks. And so we have these communities that you can reach out and find people to work with or go on this journey with together to kind of help you calm those nerves. Mackenzie also mentioned that Women Who Code absolutely supports joint talks, and joint talks are a really good place to get started if you've never given a talk before. It's also a really cool way to give a talk because it can give you some like really interesting perspectives that you wouldn't get presenting a talk by yourself. So she mentioned that I have given a joint talk in the last Connect, and so I gave that talk with another junior Android developer. And we were both learning Jetpack Compose together. Jetpack Compose is a really new framework for the Android developers out in our audience and for everyone else. And so I'm learning it as a senior Android developer, and she's learning it as a junior Android developer, and we come from really different backgrounds. And so together we were able to build a really robust topic and talk that considered how to think about Android from different backgrounds, how to think about Android with different skill sets, how to think about Android at different levels of your Android career. And so not only can doing a joint talk help you have someone to bounce ideas off of, someone to built in that has to practice with you and has to give you feedback and has to help you build out that slide and that flow and your content, but it also can make for some really cool topics and things that you might not think of all by yourself. And then it's also just okay, something to keep in mind, and that it's okay, and we've all started somewhere. I will share my own personal embarrassing story about giving a talk. My first lightning talk, I practiced it by myself, and it was over 15 minutes long, and I was like, yes, perfect length, right there at the 15-minute mark. And when I gave it live, it was about 8 minutes long. And so I talked so fast, I shaved off half the time. And so regardless of how your first talk goes, or your 15th talk, or your 100th talk, you're a human. You can stumble over your words. You can take a breath. repeat that sentence, and no one is going to be super, super worried about it. So it's very nerve-wracking to jump on a stage and talk about something, but know that everyone's been in that position before. Okay, so you have picked a topic, you've written your CFP, it got accepted, that's awesome. So what are you going to do now? So first, no matter where you're submitting the topic, and a lot of these tips are going to apply whether you're applying to our Global Connect conference here at Women Who Code, you want to apply to a different conference that's in your personal specialty, you want to apply and speak somewhere local and small for your first time. No matter where you're speaking for the first time, it's really important to step back, accept that that is a super exciting accomplishment, that you overcame those nerves, that you picked a topic, that you did all these things, and that someone thought that that was a really valuable topic and they want to hear more about it. So you should definitely celebrate that win, regardless of where you're speaking and what conference you got into. Okay, so now that we've celebrated, it's time to get down to the hard work. How am I going to prepare my slides and my presentation and my talk? For me, getting started is often the hardest step. So sitting down, looking at a blank PowerPoint and figuring out what I need to do next. Once it's kind of there, then I can kind of get my momentum going and roll with it. So the way that I get started and overcome that huge barrier of a completely blank presentation is I try to make a list of all the topics that I want to cover. I just kind of think about my CFP, what I said I was going to talk about, and write down everything that I think needs to be in that presentation. And then from that, I start building out my outline. And so I take that completely blank slide deck and just put in titles. My most recent talk was on Jetpack Compose with Alex. And so we went through and said, okay, the first thing we have to talk about is what a composable is. So we just put in a slide that had the word composable on it. And then we said, okay, we have to talk about how to build a layout. So the next slide just had the word layout on it. And then we had to talk about how to make it pretty. So we had a slide with just the word modifiers on it. And so we ended up having about 10 slides that said, these are the big topics that we're going to hit. And these are how we're going to kind of transition through those. And then that also gives you an opportunity to focus on the parts that are maybe easier or harder and kind of split out that work. There are things that I really like talking about. I really like the UI of Android development. And so I really like talking about all the different modifiers that you can use in Jetpack Compose. So those were the first couple of slides that I personally built out. I don't like introductions very much. I feel like I'm always super awkward when I'm trying to get my talk started and introduce the topic and not just dive in awkwardly. And so those are the last slides I built out. And so by building out that outline, it gives you kind of your framework for you to say, hello, I don't have enough energy to do the hard part today, so I'm just going to build out something I know. It's also okay to use a script. Virtual conferences are a great time to get started with public speaking because it gives you a lot of flexibility with how to prepare and how to present your topic. For some folks, that means that you can write an entire script out and read it during your talk. And then you don't have to worry about things like memorizing it, skipping something, because you have all your notes available to you. I'm also breaking almost all of these rules today. I told Mackenzie that before we got started, is I'm in an unusual space. I only have one monitor. I do not have a script in front of me. So this is very much on the fly today. So don't be like me. So you can present using different monitors and choose which windows you want to share. The Women Who Code conferences uses a platform called Hopin. And so if you do this in Chrome, you can actually pick specific Chrome windows to share. And so the way that I set myself up before I give a talk is I put my presentation into presenter view, and we'll have a picture of what that looks like on the next slide. And I pull my slides into its own window so that I can pick that single window to share. That way, none of my notifications from Slack or email or Facebook or any of these things pop into the window. So my audience can only see my slide deck. And then I often move that over to an external monitor because it's actually not super important to me what those slides actually say, because I'm always looking at my presenter view. So right now you can see the presenter view, and this is just a setting inside of, I use Google Slides to build my slides, but it exists in most presentation platforms, is you get your image of your slide. So the big slide is the one that you're currently sharing. And then you also get your previous and your next. And then you can see the script that I've written for this particular presentation on the right side of that presentation view. And it also gives you a time, because most presentations that you give are going to be timed presentation. And so it gives you a really good way to check in with your time and look at it as you keep going. For me, I actually don't like reading the scripts that I write, but I found that writing the scripts puts me in a really good position to give a talk, because I've already written out everything that I want to say, and that kind of ingrains it in my personal memory. When I actually read the script myself, I get really caught up on the words and it ends up just like jumbling out of my mouth. But much like how I learned in school, is taking notes was really good for me. And so writing my script out ahead of time is really good for me, even if I'm not going to sit there and read it word for word. It gives me a really good idea of what I'm going to say on each slide, what the transition between slides are going to be, and it gives me that preparation that I need to be really confident about what I want to say when I present to other people. Okay, so how do I prepare my slides if I want to interact with my audience? So interacting with an audience is one great way to stay connected with your audience and make sure you're giving them information that is relevant to them and relevant to their skill level, or gauging if what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And so with most platforms, including Hopin, there are a lot of integrations to use polls and those kinds of tools to help you interact with your audience. So for something like Hopin, you can consider integrating Slido into your presentation, and then you can manage the results, ask those questions, see all the results while you're presenting. I also want to throw out that it's totally okay if you don't want to interact with your audience at all during your presentation, and you really just want to focus on what you're saying and what your topic is and getting those points across. When I got started speaking, I actually had to close all of the windows that had chats moving and people joining and leaving, because that was really distracting to me. I didn't want to know how many people were in my audience. I didn't want to know the nice things that they were saying. I didn't want to know any of that while I was actually presenting. And so I just hid all those windows. I'm a little bit more comfortable now as a public speaker. I hope that's coming across. And so right now I have the chat up. I have everyone's Q&A up, and I can see these different things. But that did not work for me when I got started, and I did not want to look at those different things. And so I waited until the end of my presentation for someone like on my moderator to say, these are the questions that popped up, and then I might read it later, because there are often really nice things in your comments, and you should definitely check them out. And then finally, Mackenzie mentioned earlier some of the CFP resources. It's also important to know that Women Who Code provides a lot of speaker resources as well. So once you get your talk accepted, they will send you an email with all of their different speaker resources to help you prepare and think about things like slide design. They might have a slide deck template that you can use. There is so many resources out there for how to kind of build out a slide deck, how to put your content together, and those kinds of things. So definitely check those out as well as you get started. And finally, definitely consider practicing your talk. I find practicing talks to be really awkward and uncomfortable. And I really don't like speaking in front of people that I know. I'm totally comfortable speaking in front of a huge audience of strangers, but once I see someone I know, it's really uncomfortable for me. Something to think about is not only you need to practice, but also think about who you're practicing and what kind of feedback you want from those different groups. If I'm presenting a really intense Android topic and going on a really technical deep dive, that's not something I want to give to someone who's not in the Android community. That's a really great time to utilize my personal network, maybe present at my office for a lunch and learn, do it one of our Friday guild meetings, those kinds of things, to get feedback from other people who know the Android ecosystem really well. If I'm doing something like an intro level Android talk, those might not be the people that I want to get feedback from, because they, like me, could probably skip over some steps that aren't going to make sense to other people. I might say something like, oh, here we're going to use Stateflow so that we can easily update our UI. And in reality, that has a lot of information behind it, like what that class is, why I'd want to use it here, what it does, how to actually use that to update my UI. And I, as an Android developer, all those things make sense, and that sentence is perfectly reasonable. But for someone just getting started, you might need to know all those extra steps. And so it might make more sense to present to, again, that group of friends that work in tech and don't know all the things, or even consider giving that talk to my friends and family who don't work in tech at all, to say, hey, Sierra, these are things that don't make sense to me. And so you need to go in more in depth, add more detail here, tell me more about it. And finally, if you're giving a talk, you should absolutely celebrate and promote that on your different social medias. That can be really hard for some people. It's really hard for me. I don't like promoting my own talks. But something really valuable that you can do instead is reach out to your company and let them know that you're giving a talk. So I let my company know that I'd be here today talking about how to give a talk. And so you can see that they promoted this event for me, so that I didn't have to do it myself. Your company is going to be really excited that you're giving a talk. They want their own names out there in the tech community. Right now, tech hiring is wild. And so they're probably hiring, if I had to guess. And so you participating in these kind of things is really beneficial to them as well. So even if you aren't comfortable promoting your talk, make sure to tell your company that you're going to be here giving a talk, and they might promote it as well. And finally, let people know where they can find you after your talk. On all of my slides, I include a slide deck that includes my Twitter account and my personal website, as well as links to find my slides. With almost 100% certainty, someone will ask you for your slide deck afterwards. So make sure to think about what your slide deck looks like when you're not here presenting it. So will people be able to understand that flow if you're not there to give that supplemental information? And then also be sure to include an easy to find link that says, here's my slides, you can just go find them. For me, I put all my slides and code on my GitHub so that I can just give everyone my GitHub username, Sierra O'Brien, and they can go out and look at the repository, find the slides and the sample code all together in one easy to find place. And then finally, just remember that Women Who Code is a really supportive and welcoming community. And so it's a great place to give your first talk. We are absolutely here to be your personal cheerleaders and help you through the entire process. So these are some of the tips and tricks that have worked for me to get me to where I am today. And they might not work for you, and that's okay. You have to think about what works for you and your learning style and your speaking style and your preparation style. And so find what does. And then we would love to hear those tips and tricks as well.
All right. Thanks so much, Sierra. I feel like you had a lot of really great insight, especially from your past experience as a speaker for various conferences and for specifically Women Who Code events. We do have a few audience questions. So the first question is, can we submit more than one talk proposal? And yes, absolutely, you can submit as many talk proposals as you'd like. My one advice is just to make sure that when you are submitting that, you're submitting your final draft of your talk. There is not an opportunity to go back in and edit your talk after you submit. So just keep that in mind, but you can definitely submit talks on various different topics and technologies, or if you're interested in a career related topic, but also a technical topic as well. The next question is, what specific advice do you have regarding talking about a project that is just for fun? Sierra, did you want to go ahead and take that question?
Yeah.
I can read it again if you'd like.
No, I have it up as well. So what specific advice do you have regarding talking about a project that's just for fun? My specific advice would be talk about it and have fun. One of my most recent talks about a library called MLKit for Android and iOS is just for fun. I've never used it professionally. And so it has been a really great talk for me to talk at kind of an entry level of here's something that I kind of put together in a weekend that has a lot of ways to kind of customize and build much bigger, robust projects. And so that's kind of how I would probably go about that, is saying this is something that really interests me. Here is why it really interests me. Here's why I have chosen to do that for fun, because specifically when you're thinking about things that you're doing just for fun, it's usually because you're passionate about it or interested in it, or it's a really cool thing to deep dive into. And so just pointing that out and saying, this is why it's driven me to do it outside my work hours or outside of my full-time job. And this is why it might be really interesting to you as well.
That's a really great point. Someone that also comes to mind is someone who I admire, and she is a really prominent speaker in the tech community. Her name is Jen Looper, and she actually creates these type of projects for fun. One of her recent talks that I saw was machine learning for poets, and she created an app based on Emily Dickinson, and it was just really for fun. And she created a talk out of it. And so I think that you can get a lot of inspiration from others in the community. So definitely take a look at our YouTube channel, because I think that there are like a lot of projects that are created there that are just for fun. And so you might take some inspiration from that. So our
I think
final
it also,
question,
sorry, one more thing is I
ahead.
think it really offers an opportunity to kind of story tell as well, which can be in a really engaging way to write a topic or talk when it's just not a technical talk where you're like, you do this and then you do this and then you do this and here's your final outcome, is telling the story of how you found that topic, why you found that topic, and those kind of things, and include that really personal touch on it.
Yeah, exactly. Storytelling and the personal touch, and just like being able to combine it with like a hobby of yours. I think that also makes your talk stand out and makes it even more interesting for the audience. So our last question in the Q&A section was, are lightning talks also accepted for Connect? Yes, like we are accepting lightning talks, and then like full length talks, which is 35 minutes. And then we also accept workshops, which is typically from 50 to 60 minutes. But those were the questions that we received in like the Q&A portion. So if anyone has any questions now, we'll give a few minutes if you want to drop them in the chat, or I can also like unmute you if you wanted to have a conversation about anything that we talked about in this presentation. And thank you all so much for attending today. If you have any follow-up questions with us that you don't necessarily have now, but you think about later when you're writing your CFP or about to submit your CFP, you can send those to connect@womenwhocode.com. If you're part of like the track communities on Slack, you can also reach out to Sierra and I individually if you'd like to ask us any questions. But thank you all, and thank you again, Sierra. I think that you gave like a lot of insight as your own perspective as like submitting talks and also being a speaker. And thank you all to who joined and asked us questions. Let's see. Gracie said, thank you for your tips. I gave my first English talk of the first Digital Connect, and it was a very supportive community for her. That's amazing. Thank you all. And we'll post this to YouTube as well, so in case you want to share with anyone else. But thank you, and I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.